Cris Pannullo returned for his 13th game on Jeopardy! He won a 12-day total of $380,881 and is tied with Seth Wilson and Austin Rogers' number of wins. Obligatory thumbs up. Ken Jennings' instruction was, our champion, Cris Pannullo, proved in yesterday's game that his 5-week hiatus from Jeopardy hadn't impacted his performance one bit as he clinched yet another Jeopardy runaway game. With 12 wins, there are now only 10 players ahead of Cris in Jeopardy's history who have won more games than him, and 10 players who have won more money than him. Even Seth Wilson at this point? So, no pressure, Cris. With a victory today, you could find yourself on the Jeopardy leaderboard of legends in 2 different categories. Katie and John, I'm sure you're here with different goals for yourselves. Cris got the first daily double, weighted 1,000, and it was obvious. In a 1918 declaration, a readjustment of the frontiers of Italy should be effected was 0.9 of this many. What is 14? Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. That took in $1,800. Only seconds after this, there was another question involving the number 14. In the 14th, probably a typo. You can go underground and explore this part of Paris and the 6 million or so I rest there. What are the catacombs? In a law degree, JD is short for this Latin phrase. I feel bad for Cris. He buzzed and answered, what is Juris Doctorate? And just as Ken was about to accept his answer, he caught on to the doctorate, which made it incorrect. Katie buzzed in and answered, what is Juris Doctor? Which was the correct answer. Speaking of Katie, her story reminded me of Michael Menkes' anecdote. You remember him, right? He was a champion who was defeated by 4-day champion David Sibley, and was only 2 returning champions behind Cris. Katie Rudolphi, a civil servant from Grand Prairie, Texas. She said yes under her breath, which is so hot to hear. Always watches Jeopardy with whom? She answered, I used to watch it when I was a kid in the summertime with my grandmother. Ken asked, and when he got the call to be on the show? She answered, I was with her. She was absolutely ecstatic, and she's excited to see her granddaughter play on Jeopardy. Ken told her, well, say hi to Grandma while you're here. I'm surprised Ken didn't mention different generations of Jeopardy viewers as he did on Michael's 4th game. And speaking of families, Chris's anecdote was about his large family and how it relates to his trivia. Yeah, I'm the oldest of 5, so every night during my run, it's, text threads with Rachel, Colin, Morgan, and Sarah, and if you wonder how I can remember so many trivial things, remembering all those names and birthdays is a real challenge for me. Ken told him, yeah, I wonder if we can see if people with larger families are better at remembering names and birthdays and therefore Jeopardy. We'll have to do the study. When I first heard this, I would have used myself as an example. I don't come from a large family. Actually, now that I read that out loud, I actually do technically come from a large family because I see, growing up, I would see my aunt and uncle fairly often. So yeah, I remember a lot of names and birthdays and therefore Jeopardy. Turns out I don't even have to use myself as an example. You can just look at the names of anyone on the Jeopardy leaderboard of legends. Ken Jennings is an only child. That's what it appears to be, at least. Amy Schneider mentioned the tragic fate of one of her siblings, which I'm pretty sure is the only sibling she mentioned on the show. James Holzhauer and Ryan Long were the only super champions to have been parents throughout their run and only have one child. Matea mentioned her brothers in her 11th game, so there definitely are case studies. The 1883 eruption of this Indonesian volcano was heard 100 miles away in what's now Jakarta. What is Krakatoa? This is actually the loudest sound ever recorded. And of course, I have to mention people only know the name Krakatoa because of SpongeBob, which came up as a reference in 3 different categories yesterday. Nice French pronunciation. Cris entered the first round winning $7,400. Katie was in second place at $4,600, and John was in third place at $3,200. In 1841, Richard Wagner composed De Vliegende Hollander, this opera in English. What is the Flying Dutchman? Another name people will know because of SpongeBob. It's crazy that for 2 nights in a row we got more than one SpongeBob reference, technically. Yes, I do know that was a coincidence. Also, since I mentioned that the Flying Dutchman is a character in SpongeBob, the voice actor Brian Doyle was actually one of my favorite actors at one point. John got the first daily double for his $5,000. Unfortunately, answered wrong and went down to $1,000. Anne Goldstein learned Italian to read Dante and has translated this pseudonymous author whose name rhymes with Dante, who is Ferrante. So, ghosts, or in this case, the Flying Dutchman, and Dante were mentioned as we're heading toward the end of November.
He got both daily doubles.
Cris got the second daily double on Double Jeopardy, wagered $7,000, and I knew this answer too. Thomas Hobbes translated this work on the man that, having sacked the sacred town of Roy, wandered so long at sea. What is the Odyssey? An epic poem mentioned in Dante's Inferno. That's $619,200. So it just plays until the buzzer sounds. 1961, Haley Mills and Haley Mills. 1998, Lindsay Lohan and Lindsay Lohan. The answer was obviously what it's a Parent Trap. I wasn't originally going to add this or say anything. Then this happened. 1976, Barbara Harris and Jodie Foster. 2003, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan. What do you know? Lindsay Lohan was mentioned again. Now I feel obligated to mention. I had crushes on Lindsay and Jamie when I was a kid. And since we're talking about... I won't go down that rabbit hole. Actually, now that I did. This aired on the 23rd of November. Ming-Na Wen's birthday is November 20th. And Jamie Lee Curtis's birthday is November 22nd. The day before this episode aired. Again, I don't know how conscious of a decision this was to correspond to the air date. Or an estimated air date. It sure is one heck of a coincidence. And speaking of love, 1968, Dean Jones and Herbie. 1997, Bruce Campbell and Herbie. I felt bad for Cris. He buzzed and answered, "What is Herbie the Love Bug?" when the answer was just Love Bug. An opera name for this character is based on The Merry Wives of Windsor. The answer was Falstaff, who came up on Ryan Long's 14th game. Despite his own rules against sorcery, this monarch traveled to the city of Endores to console a witch. The answer was Saul, who was the answer on the last of the semifinals. Cris ended Double Jeopardy winning $28,000 even. Katie was in second place at $9,000 even, and John was in third place at $5,400. The final Jeopardy category was seconds in history. This should have come up in the second chance tournament. The question was, the Fortune, the second ship to land at this harbor, disappointed those already there, carrying 35 new residents, and not so much as biscuit cake. John and Katie. I just noticed their names together almost John and Kate, as in John and Kate plus 8. John and Katie both guessed Jamestown and ended up having an anagram of numbers as their scores. The answer was Plymouth. Yes, an important historical week the Mayflower colonists were hoping to be resupplied and just got new mouths to feed instead. Ken told him, "I bet it ends with," as he was introducing the scores, because Cris wagered $7,221 and that took his final score to $35,221. He's now at a 13-day total of $416,102 and is tied with Matt Jackson's number of wins, and at this point I think earned more than Matt Jackson did in his 13 games. Can he beat his record tomorrow?
And as always, thank you for watching.